Legion is the dictionary definition of false advertising. The trailers make it look practically like a summer blockbuster, which I'll admit no one should really expect considering a January release. But what I mean is, it looks epic, and a film called Legion probably should be epic. It's about the apocalypse, about God turning his back on humanity. But never did I get the indication from the trailers that the entire film takes place in a diner in the middle of nowhere. I guess that's why trailers exist, to get people into the theater, not to tell them what they're really getting themselves into. The title itself is false advertising. Oh, there's a legion of angels. We just only ever see two of them. Michael and Gabriel, the former who doesn't agree with God's decision to wipe out the human population, or at least I gather that's what's happening. Considering the whole thing takes place in a diner in the middle of nowhere, we never really see what happens to anyone else. And the latter, who does God's bidding without question. The other, air quotes, angels, apparently possess humans and make them act basically like zombies and other horror film creatures, which comes off just as an excuse to have an old lady run across the ceiling and an ice cream truck driver to have a really long face. You might think you're going to see a whole legion of angels with wings swooping down to attack mankind. Nope, never happens. What should have been a biblical epic is a jumbled mess. It really feels like the filmmakers advertised the movie they wanted to make, then they didn't have the budget, and then made this thing instead. Maybe they wasted all their money on big actors and then they couldn't afford anyone else. The first half hour is really quite fun and comes off like a graphic novel about the end of the world set in a diner, with clever lines of dialogue from Hicks and city people who have gotten lost here and have no clue about what's happening. It doesn't take itself too seriously at first, and when the old lady shows up and starts running around on the ceiling, it's funny, and it actually feels like it's trying to be funny. But as soon as Michael shows up with his guns, telling the other characters nothing more than to shoot anyone who shows up and that the pregnant girl is really important, gee, I wonder why, it turns into something else entirely. It doesn't stop being absurd, but now it's pretentious, too. All the really obvious references are there, and we're expected to think they're clever. The diner/gas station is called Paradise Falls. Not kidding. The angels are called God's, air quotes, dogs, and they wear collars, though it's never explained what those are for, why exactly Michael was able to lose his just by shooting a dog in the first scene. And, of course, the only thing that can save mankind is the child the pregnant woman is carrying, and although it was never meant to be born, apparently it happens anyway. I don't get it. This is God. Why is the child born if it's not supposed to be? Oh, and it's never even mentioned if it's an immaculate conception. It really does sound like some guy got her pregnant, but it's the second coming of Jesus anyway. Nothing in this movie makes any kind of sense. The angels wear armor, use knives and swords, and Michael even uses guns, and they can be killed just like humans. In fact, besides wings, I can't figure out what makes angels different from humans. God seems really wishy-washy here. He wants to save mankind, then he wants to destroy it, then he changes his mind again. He sends a huge cloud of flies, but then they disappear with no explanation as to why. He has angels possess people and lets them get killed. There's no way of knowing what happens to the angels who possess them, I guess, rather than just coming down themselves like Michael and Gabriel do. This version of God is incompetent. I want a new one. And it's pretty obvious that the only Christian theology these filmmakers know comes from superior movies about the same thing. Too bad the Book of Eli didn't come out before this, because they could have learned a thing or two from that film as well. It's fun for a while in a B-movie sense, but there's a point where the director, or maybe even the writer, seems to have gotten bored. It degenerates into one pointless exchange after another, where the characters talk about faith, but it ultimately never culminates into anything. The film tries to tackle a number of issues, including abortion, but like calling the diner Paradise Falls, these attempts are so obvious and cliché that I found myself waiting for it to make its overarching point about religion and the fall of man. I guess I shouldn't be too surprised that moment never came.